Today we are going to be doing something a little differently. These builds are by no means OP. Honestly, most of them aren't even P. This is our side-by-side comparison of 10 absurd cosplay builds in Elden Ring. These builds will be scored out of 10 with 3 categories: practicality, fun, and aesthetic. So without further ado, let's get into the list.
At number 10 we have...
Who's that Pokemon? It's Ivysaur! Ivysaur!
This build consists of Vine Whip, Solar Beam, Petal Dance, and Poison Powder. If you're a fan of whip builds, you might actually get some enjoyment out of this Ivysaur build. We are not. This build is a strength dex arcane build, which makes it one of the more difficult builds to scale. We also did give Ivysaur the Sword of Night and Flame in order to cast Solar Beam, so int would also be a fourth factor for proper scaling. For Ivysaur build, fire is actually super effective, since the armor for this build gives you negative fire resistance. Furthermore, whips don't deal a large amount of damage, so unless you're spec'd for Solar Beam or Millennia's Flower, boss battles are going to drag on. For these reasons, Ivysaur scored a 2 out of 4 for practicality. The Ivysaur build was difficult. It was basically like putting the game on a higher difficulty and scattering your skill set for almost no benefit to yourself as a player. On top of that, it's more of a reminiscent homage to Ivysaur rather than a true cosplay. For these reasons, we're giving the Ivysaur build a 1 out of 3 for fun and a 1 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing the total to a 4 out of 10.
At number 9, we have the high ground Anakin, Obi-Wan. This build consists of a blue lightsaber and the Force. There's no spell it's just a lightsaber, guys. This build is really a challenge mode build because there's only one weapon and no spells or incantations. The best way to scale this build is with intelligence. The best advantage that a Jedi has is the Force, and we don't have the Force here because it's Elden Ring. Another drawback is you eventually have to babysit Luke, and for those reasons we're going to give it a 1 out of 4 for practicality. So because this build is so challenging and the scaling is just bizarre, on top of not having any spells or incantations, it was a difficult one, I gotta say, for PvP and PvE. For those reasons, we're gonna give it a 1 out of 3 for fun and a 3 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing the Obi-Wan build to a 5 out of 10.
Obi-Wan's outfit was hard to get just right. There wasn't really a chest piece that looked exactly like Obi-Wan from the movies, but here's a couple different outfits that basically got the job done.
At number 8, we have Hugh Jackman. Van Helsing. This build is built around a crossbow. We use Crepus's bow, and we couldn't find anything close to that weird blade spinning thing on Van Helsing's wrist, so we went with Giza's wheel. If you're a fan of sniping people or killing werewolves or shredding people to a million pieces, you're going to love this build. Unfortunately, this crossbow seems to scale off of nothing, so for Giza's wheel, it scales off of strength and dex. This crossbow is extremely slow to use, so we didn't really use it in most scenarios, but the wheel is excellent in almost every case. If you don't like the pacing of the crossbow, you can at least Spartan kick them out of midair. This build will be perfect for killing vampires, but there are none in this game. For those reasons, we're giving it a 2 out of 4 for practicality. This build looks a lot like the actual character, but unfortunately, it just overall sucks. And for those reasons, we're going to be giving it a 1 out of 3 for fun and a 2.5 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing the total to a 5.5 out of 10.
At number 7, we have the Darth Maul build, or the Obi-2 build, because the Obi-Wan is 1 and this is the second Jedi. This build consists of the twinned Night Swords and the Blood Flame Affinity, and is essentially a Dex Arcane build with face paint. The drawbacks for this build, we were feeling about 50-50. Fortunately, this was a Dex Arcane build, so it wasn't that bad. So for those reasons, we're going to give it a 3 out of 4 for practicality. I enjoy a Twin Blade build as much as the next guy, but unfortunately that was pretty much all this build had going for it, but it does look pretty awesome. The Blood Flame Affinity really makes it look like a red lightsaber, and for those reasons we're going to give it a 1 out of 3 for fun and a 2 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing the total for Darth Maul to a 6 out of 10.
Is one of your character fantasies to be a powerful Greek god? Well, seek no further. For number 6 is the Cupid build. This build consists of the harp bow, the Bewitching Branch, and virtually no armor protecting your body, with a strong motive to make people fall in love. The Barrage Ash of War for this bow is actually extremely fun and satisfying, especially when they're just trying to beat the crap out of a naked man. On top of that, PvP was extremely humiliating if you were able to succeed in the fight. The bow scales a little bit off of strength and dex, but ultimately doesn't have much scaling in general, and because you don't have to wear any armor, I would just put everything into vigor to try to last as long as possible. The drawbacks to this build are that you constantly run out of arrows, because that's your only way of attacking, and that you just take so much damage. One of the benefits to this is that you get to select whatever types of arrows you like, which means you can trade off with bleed arrows, holy arrows, or etc. for killing specific enemies. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to make it extremely practical, so we are giving it a 0.5 out of 4 for practicality. As much as this build wasn't practical, it was extremely hilarious for the aesthetic, and although you might not be extremely successful in PvP, it was a very successful, annoying build to troll enemies with. It was very surprising that we were able to put together pieces of armor in this game to make an actual aesthetic of Cupid. So for those reasons, we're going to be giving it a 3 out of 3 for fun, a 3 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing it to a 6.5 out of 10.
At number 5, we have the roundest build, the ball build. You're a ball.
The bowling ball build consists of balls on your hands, your body, and your face. This build does strike damage and sometimes spare damage. If you feel as though your bowling skills are poor, you can always let out a braggart's roar. Drawbacks for this build is that you can't use your hands to pick anything up. For those reasons, we're going to give the bowling ball build a 3.5 out of 4 for practicality. But it is pretty good. If you're trying to cosplay as a ball, then this is top notch. But that's not really a character to cosplay as. So for those reasons, we're going to give it a 2 out of 3 for fun and a 1.5 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing the bowling ball build to a 7 out of 10.
At number 4, we have...
Who's that Pokemon? It's Pikachu!
This build consists of Tail Whip, Thunderbolt, Slash, and Thunder Jolt. Lightning is actually one of the best damage types in this game, so it's actually not that bad. Your Slash ability scales off of Dex, and all of your Lightning abilities will scale off of Faith. The drawbacks for this build are obvious, so just think about it for a second. Surprisingly, we were able to destroy a Tree Sentinel on New Game Plus 8, so for those reasons we're going to be giving it a 3 out of 4 for practicality. The aesthetic of this build was absolutely hilarious, especially when it came to fighting in PvP. That's actually how we found this build, is we saw a Pikachu and really wanted to kill it, so we replicated that build. And then your Lightning Ram ability is an ability that not many people use or even know about, but it's actually really fun to mess around with. Unfortunately, this looks more like a Make-A-Wish Pikachu than an actual Pikachu. And for those reasons, I'm going to be giving it a 3 out of 3 for fun and a 1.5 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing the total to a 7.5 out of 10.
At number 3, we have Leonardo da Vinci. No, wait. It's Leonardo the Ninja Turtle. This build consists of the Nagakiba and being a turtle. If you're someone who likes pizza and really old video games, you're gonna love this build. This build is essentially another Dex Arcane build, making it one of the most powerful builds on this list. One of the other benefits of this build is it actually has a shield. You could just rip off your shell and use it for defense. This is especially useful against Cupid. One of the only drawbacks we could really think of is you have to live in the sewer. So for those reasons, we're gonna give it a 4 out of 4 for practicality. This build actually sorta almost kinda works in a way. The helmet does give you some arcane, and the shell gives you stamina, and the Nagakiba is the Nagakiba. So, you know, it's alright. We gave it the samurai outfit.
If you really want to look like a Ninja Turtle, you should just be naked with the turtle shell.
For those reasons, we're gonna give the Ninja Leonardo DiCaprio build a 2 out of 3 for fun and a 2 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing the total to an 8 out of 10.
At number 2, we have the, oh my goodness, the Werewolf build. This build consists of claw weapons, the Beast Roar, and pretty much all of Blythe's armor. If you're a fan of Full Moons or a Dex Arcane build, then you're going to love this build. You have a lot of damage actually from your successive attacks, your bleeds, and then some ranged pressure from your Beast Roar. so it actually performed exceptionally well in PvP. But against bosses, it was aight. And for those reasons, we're going to be giving this angry dog a 3.5 out of 4 for practicality. This build was extremely fun in PvP and in open world, but it just fell a little short when it came to bosses. But the aesthetic really fit the scene of an intimidating werewolf. And for those reasons, we're going to be giving it a 3 out of 3 for fun, a 3 out of 3 for aesthetic, bringing it to a 9.5 out of 10.
At number 1, we have literally the best build in the game. Let me solo her. This build consists of the Rivers of Blood katana and the Uchigatana katana with the Hoarfrost Stomp Ash of War, and being a pothead. You might be a fan of this build if you never want to die. This build scales off of immortality. The drawbacks for this build are that there are no drawbacks. You never miss, you dodge every attack, and if you don't do those two things, you're just not good enough, or you're just not playing it right. For those reasons, we're gonna give the Let Me Solo Her build a 5 out of 4 for practicality. This build is really fun and really aesthetic, but for real, this build is actually very well thought out and pretty solid. The really only drawback actually is that you're intentionally naked, but you're building up frostbite while also rocking bleed. For those reasons, we're gonna give it just like a 20 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. This was really fun. If you had any more ideas for absurd builds, we would love to make a part 2 of absurd builds, cosplay builds,
or just builds that don't really fit in this game, but do. And now for a special announcement. We are beyond grateful to have crossed our first major milestone of 1,000 subscribers. We can't thank you all who have subscribed enough for being a part of this community, and as promised, we have a winner for the secret raffle. But they haven't responded yet. We sent them an email a couple of days ago and they just haven't responded, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna give the winner one more day to respond to our email. If they do not respond by midnight, May 6th, we will randomly select another winner from our first 1,000 subscribers. Once a winner has replied to our email and we have given them their prize, we will also give their channel a shout out in our next top 10 Elden Ring builds video. Quick note here, the only email that this channel uses to contact people is quietkingscontact@gmail.com with an S. Any other email claiming to be us is fraudulent. And one more thing, we will be holding a second surprise raffle for our next 4,000 subscribers. So if you are between subscriber 1001 and 5,000, you will automatically be entered into our second raffle and earn a chance to win the next raffle. Thanks again for watching and subscribing. We are working super hard to get more of these side-by-side comparison videos out as quickly as possible.